This is Space Minds by SpaceNews. In this week's episode, SpaceNews editor Mike Gruss talks with Julien Lamamy, Managing Director of ispace Europe from the World Space Business Week in Paris. From Luxembourg to the moon. Discover how a nimble European team is rewriting the rules of lunar exploration. Lamamy talks about building small, fast rovers, unlocking lunar hydrogen, and shaping Europe's next steps in space.
Hello and welcome to the Space Minds podcast. I'm Mike Gruss with SpaceNews, and I'm joined today by Julien Lamamy, the Managing Director of ispace Europe. Julien, thanks so much for joining us. We're recording here in Paris at World Space Business Week. I wanted to start by talking about ispace Europe. Tell me a little bit about what you all are working on. You are a subsidiary of ispace, but tell me what your particular focus is and what's working at the company there right now.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. Happy to be here in Paris, my hometown. So ispace Europe, we turned 8 this year. ispace just turned 15. And the cool thing about ispace Europe is when it was opened, so in 2017, ispace was only about maybe 20 people. So very early on, ispace, the crew in Tokyo already wanted to have a global presence in the US, in Europe, and of course in Japan. Last year was the first big concrete milestone for ispace Europe in terms of establishing a track record. We built, tested, went through the whole VMD campaign for our first lunar rover, and then it flew. On the mission 2 of ispace, we did several checkouts and crews to validate that the rover actually did work, but as you know, only could go so far. So that's our big achievement in the past 12 months, and it also is the example of our focus in terms of technology product development. Is everything about surface mobility. So the rovers to deploy payloads or to acquire data, to explore. Maybe to establish communication networks on the surface and so on and so on. And then, of course, we're in Europe and in Luxembourg specifically to see who in Europe could use our services of transportation and surface exploration, and next also telecommunications.
You brought up the rover. Let's start there because I was going to bring that up later, but let's go right to it. What were some of the lessons learned there? There were a series of successes, maybe not the ultimate. Response that you wanted, but tell me about what was learned and what you walked away with saying, like, hey, here's what we know that works.
Yes. So what I say is the most important thing we know that works is, we do a lot of cutting corners compared to what maybe NASA would do or ESA would do in terms of developing a rover, because that's what ispace is about. But we're here to show that there's another way to do things: speed, efficiency, cost, schedule. So we made our best judgment for which corners could be cut, and the fact that this rover, worked in space over, I think, say maybe a dozen checkouts. Where we also took pictures. So we really tested as much as we could for that rover still attached to the lander. That validates a very large share of those, corner cutting activities. So we know that. That judgment, those processes we established, can be reused now for our next series of rovers. I think that's the biggest validation we get from having launched Tenacious. Obviously, it's also a track record, and I think having launched it and having built that rover, tested it, launched it, operated it, we now have more credibility vis-a-vis space agencies, but also private customers. I think we'll talk about MAGPIE in a few minutes. That's also an example of building upon this first success.
Can you talk about or give an example of some of that corner cutting and how others could learn from that, or where how is it different if a European Space Agency or someone else was developing this? Is it time? Is it size? Is it weight?
It's definitely documentation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of corners cut in terms of spending time is documenting as opposed to doing, and a lot of prototyping and cheap testing as opposed to analysis, I would say. I used to be an engineer, so I'm now too remote to actually go more into the details and tell exactly where those corners got cut. But I can tell you, it's a world of difference from the programs I used to work at NASA in terms of documentation and heaviness of the testing compared to what we did.
Yeah. Let's you brought up MAGPIE, but let's talk about that. So first, tell us what that is and how that fits into the portfolio there.
So MAGPIE is basically the result of looking at what Europe has today in terms of instruments that could be used for lunar exploration right away. When I joined ispace to kickstart the R&D department of ispace Europe, I surveyed what instruments are out there. A lot of them had flight spares from ExoMars, for example, these kind of things. And the goal has been can we answer the key question about the moon, which is this hydrogen that we're seeing from remote sensing. Is it H2O? Is it OH? Is it something else? And can we do this as effectively, as cheaply as possible? And MAGPIE is a result of that surveying of instruments and trying to answer one key question. We're not trying to do the Mars exploration rovers or Curiosity, Perseverance. We're trying to be as small as possible. And so it's about a 30-kilogram rover with a radar to understand the subsurface, so the geological context, a neutron spec to know where your hydrogen is. So it's like a metal detector, but for hydrogen. And then a very shallow drill and mass spectrometer that will answer the question about is hydrogen, what is it, in what form is it. So really strong impact in terms of science, answering a key question that hasn't been answered yet. Possibly the first European mission to explore the lunar surface. ESA and other countries in Europe have had payloads launching on landers, but never really exploring the surface, so this could be the first one. And for us, it's demonstrating we can go to the next level of service. My first hire at ispace Europe was a lunar scientist. We have a data analysis team. So MAGPIE is putting all of this together. We have we wrote the science objectives for the mission. We selected the instrument. We're building the rover. We're doing the mission planning. We will do the operations. We'll process data and write, the papers at the end, of course, with the copy at the eyes. Yeah. But it's showing that it's no longer about mobility. It's, if an agency or, a private investor wants to know some information about a resource on the moon, we can put a mission to get that information to them.
So what's the next step here? What are the latest milestones for MAGPIE?
For MAGPIE?
Yeah.
We passed 2 reviews. We completed the pre-phase A. We're halfway also through the next phase. And the next big gate is the Ministerial Council, which will happen in November. So every 3 years, European Space Agency gets their budget approved. And MAGPIE is one of those budget lines. So we're hoping that the momentum carries us through, and then we're launching in late 2028.
Wow, good. Well, that's pretty exciting. Yeah. There's a lot. I know from reading that there's a lot of partners on that program. We've both talked a lot this week already with folks that partnerships in Europe are very important. But talk to me about working across that diverse group of agencies and science agencies of countries, and how that could work. And is there something to be learned there from how space in Europe works in the future?
Yeah. So what?
Because right now I'm sorry, not to interrupt, but I think there's a perception it feels very fragmented right now, or can feel fragmented.
Maybe that's a perception from the U.S.
that's fair.
So let me try to give an answer if it doesn't answer the fragmented part. So it can be confusing to have national space agencies and then the European Space Agency. I came to ispace Europe here after 16 years in the US, so I also had to kind of learn how things work. But ESA right now, and the new director of exploration, really has a strong vision for how ESA can explore the moon and other planets, and in doing so also develop new capabilities and new ways of approaching exploration. MAGPIE would be the first mission under a small lunar program, a small mission program, similar to the SMEX program for NASA. And that's very new for ESA. As I mentioned, for MAGPIE, we wrote the science objectives. So it's really a mission service delivery to ESA. ESA didn't write a statement of work, they didn't say what they wanted. We offered a mission, end-to-end, turnkey, and saying, yes, we're interested, let's work on that. And that's very new for ESA. And I would argue the same if you work for NASA. So the partnership,
there's a push in that direction.
Yeah, I would love
from
some.
both agencies.
And so the partnership here is we're learning what it means to offer mission as a service to ESA, and I think also European Space Agency is eager to learn how to work with a small entity like iSpace Europe. We're a company of 50 people, being the prime now on this full mission with many instrument partners. And not mentioning also the international collaboration aspect, where we're hoping that MAGPIE could launch on an ispace lander, Japanese lander, with a collaboration from the Japanese Space Agency. So not only we're trying to push boundaries in terms of, I'll say new space as a shortcut, using new space methods for mission as a service, but we're doing that in a more traditional framework of international collaborations, but through a private company, iSpace Japan, iSpace Europe. So I think for everybody involved, it's very exciting, very new, and I hope MAGPIE can be, yes, a blueprint for future missions to follow within Europe and also as for international collaborations.
No, that makes sense. Can we talk a little bit about the lunar economy there? I think that's something that's gotten a lot more attention, certainly in the last couple of years. iSpace is part of that, but describe to me how you see that evolving, and where, if we were to talk in 5 years, how might that look? How might that economy affect the work you're doing differently?
So we were talking about having the perspective of history a few minutes ago before the show. So already, comparing to when I joined iSpace 8 years ago to today, I think it's a world of difference in terms of the engagement, not only of agencies. 8 years ago, when iSpace was doing rovers and landers, the Artemis program didn't exist. Now we have an Artemis program. We have the Artemis Accords signed by tens and tens of countries. There's a very strong momentum worldwide, and the interesting thing is that it also extends to private companies, not only startups and ventures, but also established companies. On Tenacious, the rover that we launched, the shovel that we were going to use to collect records for NASA was developed by a mining equipment company that had been here for 100 years and had no space involvement before we talked to them. So yes, you could say it's still in development, but what's important to me is that the trend and the momentum that's building. And here we're at the World Satellite Business Week, there's a lot of communications about launch, telecoms, all that translates really well to the moon, orbital transfer vehicles, to GEO. The moon is not that much farther away. And we're seeing new business models will develop. Magna Petra, Autoloon, going after helium-3 is also very interesting to add yet another reason to develop infrastructure and have resources and goods flow between the Earth and the Moon.
You're based in Luxembourg.
Correct.
Talk to us a little bit about Luxembourg as a space hub, because that seems to be an emerging place for the global space economy.
So Luxembourg has quite a good track record in space. They established SES, top operator.
Yep.
And based on that success, in 2016, the Deputy Prime Minister decided to launch a big Space Resources LU initiative. So again, 2016, space resources were very much fringe, esoteric topic, even within the space industry. And I remember, reading about Luxembourg in SpaceNews when I was in the US, actually, at that announcement, being surprised, being like everybody else. That was a very bold move by Luxembourg to be the first country in Europe to attract not only space resources companies, but new space companies. And now we've seen France, Germany, UK, Italy catch up. But Luxembourg does have still, I think, a first mover advantage there. So iSpace Europe was established in the wake of this because we liked the bold move, the support from the government, of course, and also the alignment of space resources and exploration. I think there's over 70 companies that were established in Luxembourg, so in roughly 10 years. Really good success. We're today in the Red Wire Street. Red Wire is there, iSpace is there, Spire, and I could go on and on. And it's interesting to see that we have a good mix also of space sectors represented. So my hope for Luxembourg for the next 5 years would be that now the companies over there can start to interconnect and build even a stronger ecosystem as a result.
Yeah. Well, you brought up, hey, what the next 5 years will look like. This was going to be my last question, which was, tell me what if we were to chat in a year, what you expect.
In 1 year or 5 years?
Let's say 1 year. But where you expect iSpace Europe might be, and some of where you're hoping there might be some accomplishments. I'm thinking ministerial.
Yeah, I mean the ministerial
that's going to dictate a lot of it.
In 2 months. Maybe in that optic of the ministerial, I think the conversations about the role of the European Space Agency and the European space sector in space, given the evolution of the global politics around space, will continue past the ministerial.
This isn't just a moment. That there's momentum behind it.
Yes, I think there's still a lot of questions to be answered after the ministerial about how to build robustness, resilience, and sovereignty. And a lot of those questions are focused on launch, on human access to space. But I think they're also very critical for Europe with respect to access to the moon. So let's say my hope for 1 year from now would be being able to, in a partnership with ESA again and other space agencies, share how we could see this happen, and if I may say, influence the strategy for exploration for Europe. So we remain bold, and maybe in the face of what people can see as adversity, we take the opportunity, and 5 years from now realize, okay, in 2026 Europe made some bold decisions that turned out to be really good in the end.
Yeah. Great. Well, Julien, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
To our viewers, thanks so much for watching. This has been Space Minds Podcast. I'm Mike Gruss.